Planning, Regulatory and Licensing Committee. Please note that today's meeting will be recorded. The recording may be broadcast on the authority's internet. All attendees will be in view with a camera, and by attending you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings being used as outlined above. Just to remind councillors as well that you've got to be present for the whole meeting or hear the whole meeting before you're able to vote. If by any chance you lose the Wi-Fi for a few minutes, then you're not allowed to vote then. But as long as you can hear the whole meeting, it's not a problem. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Are there any apologies?
We have none, Chair.
None, right. Are there any declarations of interest? There's no declarations of interest. Agenda item 3 is P20-0235, 29 Trevethick Street, Merthyr Tydfil. I understand Dave's going to outline this planning application.
Chair, can I see your cameras off?
Oh, is it? No, well, the camera's on. I can see myself. And the video.
I can see Clive, Howard.
I can see Clive as well, yeah.
I can't. I can't.
Yeah, I can see Clive, yeah, it's fine. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay, David, if...
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just load up the PowerPoint for you. Okay, so this application relates to a mid-terrace two-bedroom property in a predominantly residential area, which, as you can see from the plan, is accessed from Trevithick Street. Planning permission is sought to convert the existing dwelling into two one-bed flats, with one flat located on the ground floor and the other located at first floor level. The exterior of the building would largely remain unchanged, with some minor alterations proposed to the front of the building, mainly just new windows and a front door. The existing ground floor window on the rear elevation would be blocked up, and a new window and patio door would be provided there as well. Both of the flats would be accessed from the existing front door via a communal hallway, and parking would be accommodated along the street or in the nearby car parks. No objections were raised as a result of the consultation exercise. However, we did receive 2 letters of objection following the publicity exercise, which included a petition with 72 signatures. The main concerns raised related to noise and disturbance, the lack of rear access, which they feel presented a fire safety risk, concerns with parking, and the potential devaluing of existing properties within the street. The existing dwelling currently provides 2 bedrooms, which is suitable to accommodate, potentially up to 4 adults living together as a single household or by a small family. The proposal does not seek to increase the number of bedrooms. As such, it's important to note that there would not be an increase in the number of people that could already reside at the property. It is considered that the proposal would not result in intensification of the existing residential use to such an extent that it would adversely impinge on the amenities of the neighbouring occupiers. In regards to highway matters, there would be no change to the existing parking arrangements for the property, which is, as I say, is accommodated along the street or in the nearby car parks. And given that there is no increase in the number of bedrooms, there isn't a change in the parking requirements for the proposed use either. The property is also in a sustainable location, so it's close to the town centre and other local services and public transport. So, there's not a need for additional parking for visitors and things like that. Accordingly, it's recommended in the report that the application be approved, subject to the conditions set out at the end on page 11. And to just go through now some of the slides for the application. So I've pinpointed roughly where the mid-terrace property is, as you can see, within the context of the street. This is just a simple plan, really, just showing the existing and proposed arrangements internally. So as you can see on the top left there, you've got the ground floor and first floor plans. I don't know if this works. No, didn't mean to draw, but there we go. So that there is obviously the existing arrangement. As you can see on the right-hand side, that doesn't really change. There's some minor internal partitions adjusted, sort of in this area here and at the top there. But on the whole, it's exactly the same as it currently is internally. Just obviously, there's now a bedroom on the ground floor and on the first floor. So this is how it looks currently within the street. So the picture on the left just shows the property in a little bit more context, and just to highlight, that's the application site there. So fairly typical, and the photo on the right just is a sort of a close-up version of the picture, so you can see how it relates to the neighbouring properties on either side. This is looking in the opposite direction away from the site. Both pictures basically just show the sort of parking provision in the area. So obviously, as I've shown up here, everyone's parking generally along the street. And here you can see there's in the picture on the left, there's a little parking area with some spaces available, and further around the corner there's another parking area. This was taken sort of mid-afternoon, so it's fairly representative of what the parking is like generally throughout the day, I suppose, given that in the COVID times most people are probably still at home. And and that's the application.
Oh, thanks. Are there any questions? I can't see everyone, so let me know.
Clive Jones, Chair.
Oh, Clive Jones. Right, Councillor Jones, yes.
Thank you. Can I start off with, I understand the present owner of 29th of Ethics Street has now withdrawn from the offer of a large grant from Welsh Government. Does that mean that the various repairs and additions, the installation of the new replacement windows, new front door, minor alterations inside, the blocking up of one of the existing ground floor windows, can the plan officer tell me if that is still going ahead and is not affected by not taking up the grant?
Well, as I understand it, there is no grant available for the applicant anymore. That was to address a particular housing need, and part of that was to help renovate the property to make it suitable for that purpose. As I understand it, this is independent of that. The applicant is proposing this, so if they choose to undertake those works to improve the property, they do so, by themselves.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few other questions. On the bottom of page 4, under the heading publicity, there's a number of dots there, and the first one, it refers to there are concerns from the residents that the subdivision of the property into 2 flats would exacerbate the level of noise and disturbance in the area at unsocial hours. On page 6 of the report, under the heading of impact on local amenity, you state there is no evidence to suggest that the conversion of the property would give rise to an increase in the level of noise and disturbance in the area. The owner of the property, i.e. the landlord, hasn't changed. It's the same landlord that was there before as it is now. And that landlord let the property, frankly, beforehand to what turned out to be an irresponsible tenant who has left the property. But during the time that was there was a considerable amount of complaints about antisocial behaviour, including parties that went on until the very early hours of the morning. Do you accept that there is, because the same landlord is there, Mr. Chairman, and there won't be just one tenant now, but two, and that is, it could be two couples, that because the landlord obviously did not choose the tenant wisely, that there is a possibility, a distinct possibility of antisocial behaviour happening again?
Well, as I understand it, as you rightly point out, the tenants that previously occupied the property, which is no longer residing there now, it's reported that they were obviously having parties and to the early hours of the morning, and the comings and goings of the people who were associated with those parties were obviously causing considerable noise and disturbance. That sort of issue is true for any property. I don't think that necessarily specifically relates to the use of this property in its own right. And you get good neighbours and bad neighbours anywhere. What we're considering here is the subdivision of an existing property for the same use. There's no increase in the number of people that can already live there. You could already have 2, 3 or 4 people residing at that property. So there's no change in that circumstance. So whilst it may have been rented out, and it may be the same landlords, and you may have had a bad tenant there, you could equally get a good tenant, and so I don't think you can necessarily judge the merits on the application on the basis of the previous tenant's behaviour. As far as I'm aware, I spoke to Environmental Health regarding any complaints and noise and disturbance issues, and they informed me that they've not been informed of that, because obviously if there's a statutory nuisance, they have the powers to step in and try and address that. If there are antisocial behaviour, as well, then obviously that can be a police matter as well to resolve.
In answer to that, Chair, I think you'll find that the police were contacted on several occasions, and those calls were either logged or unlogged, but there were certainly complaints as far as the South Wales Police are concerned. Can I take you, Chair, now to page 5 under the heading National Planning Policy, and it's quoted there. It's National Planning Policy, edition 10, December 2018, and paragraph 3.12, it discusses movement and states, and I quote, "Good design is about avoiding the creation of car-based developments. It contributes to minimizing the need to travel and reliance on the car, whilst maximizing opportunities for people to make sustainable and healthy travel choices for their daily journeys." Now, could you answer this question in relation to that? Surely, in relation to this property, which has been there, I would say, well over 100 years, this is not about design of the property because of the amount of time it's been there. Doesn't that particular part of Planning Policy Wales, edition 10, December 2018, particularly refer to new developments?
Well, I would say the policy relates to all forms of development. So it could be new housing, it could be existing properties that are being converted, the change of use of properties. In this case, it's particularly relevant because we've got a property which is being subdivided, which is in a sustainable location. It's close to public transport and local services. So people who reside there would have better access to services and facilities than elsewhere, perhaps.
Well, here we are. And can I take you now to page 6? And it's the highway implications. And you are right, Planning Officer, when you state, and I quote, it is acknowledged that the existing dwelling does not benefit from any designated off-street parking provision. Do you accept that as the application is for 2 flats and therefore very likely to be occupied by 2 couples, or between them are likely to have 2 cars, which they require to park in the street? And although you've shown photographs there, I know this street extremely well, having been a member of the elected member of Park Board since 2004. You can rest assured that trying to park in Trevethick Street, because it's a very long street, is a bit of a nightmare. And the small car park you talk about is some meters away from there, and that you'll find is usually nearly always fully in use, because it's not essential just for people in Trevethick Street, but people who live on the main road also park there. So do you accept the fact that there is more than likely to be an additional 2 cars trying to park there at all hours of the day and night?
Well, I think it's probably unfair to presume the exact parking arrangements. I think you've got to consider how the property is currently used and how the property might be used in terms of its subdivision. So in this instance, we've got a 2-bed house. You could have 2 people living together with 2 cars. You could have 2 couples still there living together as a single household. They may have 3 cars or 4 cars. But what's the difference is the question. And in this case, it's still 2 bedrooms. They're not looking to increase the number of bedrooms, which may intensify the number of people that are residing there. It's still potentially the same number of people. I would say it's a fairly small property. So I would say generally or typically for something of that size, you would probably expect 2 adults living together in the 2-bed house, or a very small family, probably 2 adults and maybe a child, which is dependent on them. Or in this case, with 2 single flats, you might find 2 separate adults living in each flat. So I don't think the parking needs for the 2 flats is any different to the current arrangement for the house. In terms of the parking guidelines as well, it's based on number of bedrooms up to a maximum of 3 per bed, 1 per bedroom. So in terms of the parking guidelines, that remains the same requirement. And I appreciate that the Trevithick Street, becomes congested with parking, but we've got to look at the impacts. And in this instance, I don't think the impact is any different to what the current arrangement would be.
Right. I'm now on page 6 at the bottom of the page, but I'll read you one of the objections that was on the petition of 69 residents plus the 2 occupiers either side of 29 Trevethick Street. And it says, and I quote, due to there being no rear access to the property, there are concerns that the proposed conversion of the property would present a fire risk. Then, if you look particularly at the bottom of page 6, under the heading Representations, I quote from the report, in regards to fire safety, it would be necessary for the conversion of the property to comply with the appropriate building regulations outside of the planning process. For example, the installation of fire safety doors, safe means of escape, and sprinkler systems, etc. Do you accept, from a planning point of view, that adhering to carrying out these alterations of these 2 flats must, and I stress the word must, require the installation of the safety doors, safety means of escape, and sprinkler systems? Because in this instance, because there's no rear access and you've got two flats, if you've got somebody living on the first floor flat and a major fire occurs, surely there must be a fire escape for them to get out the back end. Then there's a problem of trying to escape from the back end because there's no rear lane.
Well, on that, I would say there's no in terms of fire risk and the means of escape generally. There's no difference really. The flats, well, there's a shared front access for the first floor flat and the ground floor flat. As far as escaping to the rear of the property, well, even if it was a single dwelling, it would still be into the garden area in any case. So whether you're jumping from a first floor window, which in some cases is an option, you have like fire escape windows, or you're going through the ground floor patio doors. If you're going to the rear of the property, that's no different to the current arrangement now. And if you were upstairs and you didn't jump out a window, you'd still be expected to go down the staircase and out, either out the front door and out the back patio door. So in either case, I don't think the risk is any different in that sense. But obviously, because it's a property being subdivided, there is a risk of, because there'd be a kitchen upstairs, for instance, which there wouldn't normally be. And obviously, one flat doesn't have full access across the rest of the building. So there is a need to provide a safe means of escape, certainly from the front of the building, which can be accommodated through building regs. And as I set out in the report, there's a number of different ways that can be achieved. That might be typically you'd have a safe route corridor. So, for instance, doors leading to on the route out through your hallway and your landing areas. They would typically have to be fire safety doors, which can hold fires for a period of time. And if that can't happen, for instance, in the case of a house where you've got an open plan arrangement, which is quite the norm nowadays, then you'd be expected to put a sprinkler system so that in the event of a fire, that would douse out any flames so that people can escape safely. But as I say, that this is an issue that would need to be addressed through building regulations.
So can I put the question quite simply to you? Is it a must for this owner, if this application goes through, to install fire safety doors, a safe means of escape, i.e. a staircase at the rear of the property, and sprinkler systems to be installed? Is it a must that the owner must carry out those mitigations of fire safety?
Yeah, the conversion of the property will have to comply with building regulations. I mean, whatever features that are necessary in order to meet the regulations, they'll have to put those in. So it might be just sprinkler systems, it might be various different things, but that's not something that we would assess as part of the planning application. That's, as I say, is a separate process. But obviously, if they want to convert it, then yes, they would have to adhere to whatever is required of them through the building regulations.
Right. And do you accept, and I'm talking about the first floor tenant, fire happens in different ways. So if a fire has started and the tenant on the first floor cannot get down the stairs to escape it, but needs an escape route, it surely must happen to adhere to the fire safety of that, particularly that tenant and the other tenant below, but particularly the tenant on the first floor, as a direct means of escape from a serious fire.
Yeah, based on
Jules, can I just ask that you actually keep to planning issues and matters that are relevant to the planning application?
This is completely relevant to the planning application, Mr. Morgan.
Okay, based on the layout of the building, I would expect that the fire means of escape during a fire event would be through the communal corridor which leads out the front of the property. That's how I would anticipate it. That would be no different to if you were sleeping upstairs and there was a fire during the night and you had to escape downstairs somehow. It'd be the same arrangement. Obviously, as I say, the conversion of the building will need to comply with build regulations. So there may be certain measures they have to put in place to ensure that those routes are safe to use in the event of a fire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, Councillor Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. I think, to be honest, Clive has asked most of the questions that I would have asked, but I've just got one. In your conclusions, David, you mention the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act 2015 that has been taken into consideration when determining the application. Now, one of the goals of the Wellbeing Act is a society in which people's physical and mental well-being is maximised. Bearing in mind that 72 residents have signed a petition and the 2 complaints, how would you say that their well-being has been taken into consideration?
Well, certainly in terms of the noise and disturbance that they've raised as a particular concern, and the issues of parking, those have been taken into consideration and as set out in the report. As I say, I don't think that the conversion of a 2-bed house into 2 1-bed flats is really going to is going to be intensifying the use to such an extent that the impacts that they may experience would be any different to the current use as a single dwelling.
Okay, is there? I don't suppose there is, but I'll ask anyway. Is there any way that the landlord could be made to have a certain type of tenant there? Ones that have been vetted or something like that. Just touching on what Clive has mentioned.
Unfortunately, there's no means to control who resides in a residential property. To do so would be, I suppose, potentially discriminatory to one social group to the next. So that's not something for planning to control.
Yeah, I didn't mean differentiating social groups. I just meant people that maybe had a history of causing issues in residences that they've already lived in. Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Oh, so are there any further questions?
Can I just check, Councillor Jones, you've got no further questions because your hand's still up?
Yeah, that's correct. Sorry.
Right. So are there any comments? Oh, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It does seem to me nowadays that within the Merthyr Tydfil Council area, that any property, house, particularly if it's in the middle of a street or terrace, can be the subject of applications to convert them into flats, sometimes with all the difficulties that entails. 29 Trevethig Street is bang in the middle of a street, and this is the second application conversion into flats, having previously submitted an application for 3 flats, which also included as an extension. This was subsequently withdrawn, and I have no doubt it was because as a result of a petition signed at that time by 72 residents and occupiers either side of 29 Trevethig Street. This current application for 2 flats has not fared any better. There is a petition there of 69 residents and 2 residents living either side. I contend, Mr. Chairman, that frankly, apart from the owner who's going to benefit in relation to the fact that he'll have 2 rents rather than 1, that this will be of no benefit to any of the residents in Trevethig Street. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other comments at all?
Yeah, Councillor Salmon, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Salmon. Yeah, sorry, I can't see a hand. The bar is blocking it. That's the reason. Sorry.
Lovely, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Councillor Clive Jones's comments. And I'd also, in my opinion, I don't think that this this application meets the goals of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. I think we really need to look at these things. A healthier Wales, I don't think it reaches that goal, and also a Wales of cohesive communities. So in my opinion, I think that as Clive has said, we've got a lot of professional landlords coming in and probably ruining the character of residential streets, and I think it's not fair on the residents that live there. And I think we really need to look at the Future Generations Act and how it impacts them.
Thanks. Are there any other comments?
Can't see any, Chair.
Well, we should go to the vote. So the recommendation is that the application be approved. Would someone like to propose it? Councillor Colburn is proposing it.
Yes, I'll propose, Chair, yeah.
Is there a seconder? I'll second it. I'll second the motion. So perhaps if we take it to the vote, shall we say all those in favour? Vote now.
That's okay. That's
6. So
7, Chair.
7. If everyone puts the hand down, all those against?
4. Yeah, that's 4 against, Chair. That motion's carried.
And there are no abstentions then? No. So the vote's carried then. Oh, well, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda item 4, it's P20-0313. It's to do with the land to the rear of Kingsley Terrace, Aberfan. I understand Hugh's going to.
Could I just request that Councillor Jones lowers his hand before we proceed?
Sorry.
I understand Hugh's going to lead us through this application.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's an application that we don't very often get to committee. In fact, the 8 years I've been in Merthyr Tydfil, we haven't had such an application. It's an application, a tree preservation order application for the felling and the lopping of one of the trees there. It's submitted to a committee because the applicant works in the planning and building control section of the authority, and therefore can't deal with such matters under delegated powers. You can see the site location plan in front of you there, and you can see the location of the 4 trees in question, 3 of which are oak trees, and the other tree is a alder tree. They're in close proximity, as you can see, at the properties at the rear of Kingsley Terrace and Bring Taff. The proposal is to fell the 3 oak trees and to lop 6 metres off the top of the alder tree. As the report highlights, the oak trees have been rin-barked some time ago, which means that a portion of the bark has been removed. I understand it over 20 years ago. That takes away the phloem from the tree, which means it prevents nutrients going to other parts of the tree, and then eventually kills the tree because the tree hasn't got any nutrients, and therefore those 3 oak trees have fallen into, unfortunately, problematic circumstances and are dying or dead. The alder tree, Dave, you can just go for the photographs. Yeah, you can see the alder tree, Jess, and that's brilliant photographs, I must admit. The alder tree is the top tree where there's a red line across it. As you can see, that's bowing and leaning towards the neighbouring property, and therefore is thought to be dangerous to those neighbouring properties, and therefore the report submitted with the application suggests that should be lopped 6 metres below, roughly in line with the red line on that photograph. The oak trees are obviously, given their close proximity to the neighbouring residents as well, are also in serious harm of falling into their gardens and therefore need to come down for those purposes. The report submitted with the application gives quite a lot of evidence in terms of the decay of the tree and the fungus on the tree and the problems of the tree, and recommends that they should be felled, but also recommends that all three trees should be replaced within the same woodland of TPO trees, which, as members will see, is a condition to the application. So in accordance with the recommendation is to fell 3 oak trees, lop the older tree by 6 metres, subject to the condition which replaces the 3 oak trees with a species and location to be agreed with us. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Are there any questions?
Councillor Scott Thomas, Chair.
Oh, Scott, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one from me. Had this application not come in from an officer of the planning department, would this have just been dealt with as per by officers?
Yeah, we get these. Thanks, Councillor Thomas. Yeah, we get these applications quite a bit. Obviously, we've got quite a lot of TPO trees and TPO woodlands in our area, so we get them quite often, and they're usually straightforward applications that are dealt with in delegated powers. Usually, well, they're all submitted with a report, a professional report from an arboriculturist. Our landscape architect and arboriculturist in the authority look at it, and then we put a recommendation forward. So yes, normally delegated powers.
Brilliant, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Coleman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, so I take it that the council's ecologist was in favour of this proposal. Is that correct?
Yeah, the council's landscape architect was in favour of it. The council's ecologist has suggested that the trees, when they're felled, are then just laid on the ground, so they become habitats in their own right for relevant species in the area.
And the applicant's happy with that, is he?
Yeah, the applicant's happy with that. In fact, it's suggested in the reports as submitted by the applicant.
That was it, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Councillor Salmon.
Oh, Councillor Salmon, right.
Thank you, Chair. In the recommendations, on recommendation 2, it says if within a period of 5 years from the date of planting, the replacement trees are removed, uprooted, destroyed or die or become, in the opinion of the local planning authority, seriously damaged or defective, blah, blah. What happens after 5 years? Because I've planted trees myself and I'm sure other members have. If after 5 years the new trees die, will the applicant have to will the applicant still have to replace them?
No, they won't. The 5-year period there is for a specific purpose. It's within that 5 period. If they die within that 5 period, then they have obviously. If they don't die within that 5 period, they're established and should grow further. Any TPO tree, if it's removed, has to be replaced with another tree. However, if it's dead or dying, then it could be felled without a TPO application. So in terms of the 5 years, that's a standard 5-year period with any TPO tree. In fact, if you have a look at any appeal decision that relates to TPO trees, that 5-year condition is on virtually all the applications that have gone to the inspectorate. So it's the 5-year period because during that 5 year, it should have the tree should be well established on its way to mature growth.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Are there any other questions?
No. None, Chair.
Any comments?
Nope.
No comments. Well, it's been recommended that the application be approved. So would someone like to propose it?
Could I just check? Councillor Thomas, is that hand up to approve?
Yes, my hand is up to move the recommendation.
Is there a second? Is that Malcolm? Are you seconding it?
Yes, happy to second, Chair.
Second. Oh, we'll put it to the vote then. So all those in favour, raise your hand.
There's one vote missing.
Does anyone? want to vote against? Are there any abstentions? Oh, well,
It's carried, Chair.
it was carried anyway.
Is it
Okay.
because we're missing Councillor Galsworthy? Is that the problem, Geraint?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, yes, that explains it then. So, well, the next two items are information reports. Well, there's an appeal received and a delegated report, and I haven't got any other urgent business. Has anyone got any comments? No? Oh, well, that's the meeting closed then. Thank you all for coming. See you next month.